Everyone, it's Julie in Career Services again, and welcome to day 2 of Resume Week. Yesterday, you learned a lot about resumes and you began setting up the basic structure of your resume. Today, we're going to take it farther and talk about some tips to help you format your resume. You're also going to start filling information into some of the sections you outlined yesterday so that you can really begin creating your document. Yesterday, I talked about having different versions of your resume and how that essentially means taking the same content and formatting it differently based on the goal of that particular resume. So let's look at an example of what I mean. Let's say that this person is a nursing major and wants to apply to RN positions. As you can see in this resume, the candidate does not look like the strongest nursing candidate, even though they are qualified, because while it's a beautiful professional looking resume, the experience section does not start off with any nursing related experience. And the key sections that are critical to the nursing field, like certifications, are just missing. A recruiter might glance at this and wonder why this resume is primarily showcasing experiences outside of nursing and assume that the person is not qualified and move on, even though you can see down in their education section that they have a nursing degree. Now, this resume looks like a much stronger nursing candidate because of the way in which it is formatted. It's the same person, but the resume groups together and highlights nursing experience over other employment experiences, and it has a lot of additional information that the other resume didn't have. If this resume were submitted to a nursing position, the recruiter would likely feel that this person was a strong candidate. However, if this resume was used for, say, a cashiering job, again, while it's a great resume, the recruiter for that position might wonder why they're getting a resume like this when they're not hiring a nurse. These two resumes really illustrate how formatting techniques that we'll talk about today and resume building techniques that we'll talk about in another video work together to help you produce a tailored professional document. As a reminder, this week you only need to work on creating one version of your resume as you see fit based on your individual needs and goals. I recommend that you focus on making one geared towards your major, of course, but again, you can make a general resume or one geared towards your major. Now, aesthetically, you can make your resume look in a lot of different ways. I've already shown you a couple of samples here of how you might make a resume look. Here is another one. You can see this one. They've got lines to separate each section on the resume and draw more attention to that. A simple Google search of resumes will bring back a lot of results, and there's really no right or wrong way to make your resume visually look as long as it's professional and it follows the guidelines we'll talk about. You always want to keep in mind this is your resume. So at the end of the day, you are the one who has to be happy with it and how it looks. And when you search for images of resumes, you also will find a lot of resume templates. And as I alluded to yesterday, you really don't want to use a template. A template does not know anything about you. It has no idea that maybe you're an OTA major and you have a ton of certifications that you should definitely include on your resume. Or maybe you are really involved in your community and the employer that you would like to work for really values in community engagement. So therefore, you should have a section on your resume that talks about your community service, because that would help showcase to an employer that you might be a really good match for their company culture, and a resume template would have no idea about any of this. Another reason to avoid templates is because they often are tricky to edit. It can be really hard to get everything to align well and fit on one page, change margins, things like that. And finally, applicant tracking systems that we talked about yesterday can sometimes have a very hard time reading templates, and especially text boxes and tables. Sometimes the content that is inside of a text box or a table can appear blank to an employer once it's received through this applicant tracking system, and you do not want that to happen. Okay, so when it comes to formatting your resume, you really want to remember that it's a professional document, so it should have a different look and feel than other papers that you might write. So let's look at an example here. All right, so what did you notice? Did you notice that the resume on the left-hand side of the page is kind of set up like a typical essay that you might write for one of your courses? It's got double spacing to it. It's using Times New Roman font. Nothing really stands out. But now notice the difference in the document on the right and how that looks nicer and much more professional. Employers really pay attention to how much thought and care is put into your resume, so you want to make sure that you are always putting your best foot forward. So now let's talk about some of the formatting techniques that you can use to get your resume to look like a nice professional document. First and foremost, let's talk about length. Recruiters don't have a lot of time, so your resume is really limited real estate. You want to only include information that is relevant and recent and concise and to the point. You want to balance out your text with the white space that you are using so it's easy for recruiters to read. And more often than not, you want to keep your resume to one page max, and you want to be able to fill that page at least 3/4 of the way, if not all of the way. Not only is this preferred by employers, but it's also expected to have a one-page resume in certain industries such as business. However, it's important to note that your resume, again, is a working document and things will change. So as you go on in your careers, you get more experience in your fields, the length of your resume may eventually become 2 pages, but you would never want a resume longer than that. Some of you may even have to have a 2-page resume right now because maybe you are a career changer or you have a lot of relevant work experience prior to getting to JCC, and that's okay. Again, keep in mind that these are just general tips we are talking about, and you can apply them as necessary to your particular situation. Also, when it comes to margins, you want to use 1/2 inch to 1 inch margins. Personally, I'm a fan of a little bit smaller of a margin, so you're not wasting any space. However, a 1 inch margin is perfectly acceptable if you're just starting out in the workforce. You may not have a lot of experience yet. It can really help you kind of fill in that page. Also, you want to make sure that you keep the most important and relevant information in the top third of the page. You want to order each section of your resume based on what's going to be most important to that employer. So your education, your coursework, related experiences, things like that. And then within each section, you want to order your information from most recent to oldest and work your way backwards. The font that you choose should be clean, simple, and easy to read. Some great examples are shown on the screen here, things like Arial, Calibri, Verdana, ones like this. You should also use only one font style throughout your entire resume, and the majority of your resume should be in size 11 or 12 font. As seen on the samples earlier, I recommend that your name be in the largest font size, maybe 30 or 32, so that it really stands out to the recruiter. And then the rest of your header information could be in the same size font that you use for your body of your resume. The titles of each section on your resume, so for example, experience, skills, those can be in slightly larger fonts so that they stand out a little bit more and really help define each section on the page. You might use size 14 or 16, and you might also write those in all caps to really help them stand out. You also want to keep in mind highlighting techniques such as using bold or italics. Things that are important, like your job titles, employers you worked for, degrees that you're pursuing, scholarships you've won, that is all great information that you could put into bold or italic. You want to pick one and stick with either bold or italic. You don't want to use this technique too much because then it might be a little bit hard for somebody to read, but you do want to highlight items that you want to stand out. And you do not want to highlight information that is less important, such as employment dates. The information that you include, it's a good rule of thumb to ask yourself, if a recruiter were to only read what you put in bold, can they get a good sense of your background and what you would have to offer? If you think that an employer would get a lot of information about you that's good just from reading what's in bold, you're in really good shape.